Sunday Baroque Conversations is made possible by the Friends of Sunday Baroque and is produced at WSHU Public Radio in Fairfield, Connecticut. I'm Suzanne Bona. Thank you for listening. Don't miss an episode of Sunday Baroque Conversations. Subscribe on Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review. If you want to find out where you can listen to our weekly show, visit our website, sundaybaroque.org, for a station list and our 24/7 stream. Again, that's sundaybaroque.org.
And now the purple dusk of twilight time steals across the meadow of my heart. High above the sky, the little...
Tammy McCann is a singer. The Chicago-based jazz musician has been performing internationally for a couple of decades. And although jazz, gospel, and blues are her main musical genres these days, she trained initially as an opera singer. Tammy McCann joins me on Zoom to talk about her life and career, including her roots in opera and her path to her current musical passions. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start with the big banner on your website that says that where you declare music is your mantra. What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel very strongly that it's music that centers my life, that brings healing to me and to others. And so I really start my day with music on my mind, on my tongue, with my family. It's really something that's a cornerstone in our lives.
Wow. So let's go back to the beginning then. How and when did you start making music?
I started making music as a little girl. I mean, in church, I was in the choir, but not to the point where I felt like it would be a sustaining force in my life.
Right.
I sang in the choir at church, sang in the choir and in grammar school.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to high school, I joined the choir in high school. And my high school music teacher, Dr. Lena McLean, pulled me aside and said, there's something special here. And you're going to be a classical singer. And I'm like, actually, I thought I'd be a psychiatrist. And she said, no, you're going to be a singer. And not only a singer, but a classical singer. And I said, well, I was thinking, if I'm going to do this, what about Chaka Khan? I really like Chaka Khan. She said, no, you're going to sing classical music. So I said, yes, ma'am. And really kind of haphazardly went into the steps of learning that process.
Right.
Really not excited about it at all, and went to competition and learned the songs that she told me to learn. And without a lot of gusto, I got excellent. So I said, well, wait a minute. The competitive side in me kind of popped up like, well, if there's good, excellent, superior, right? I was like, well, if I wasn't even trying, then maybe I should try this out. It just became the love of my life. And I did my first opera when I was 15 years old, Cavalleria Rusticana by Mascagni.
Wow.
I sing in Italian, German, French. We sang in Latin. Miss McLean really created a master class atmosphere for us youngsters. And I got a scholarship for classical voice. And that was my determined journey at the time.
Wow. That's a very interesting path too, and the fact that you even admit that you weren't really terribly excited about it at first, and then your successes kind of bred that enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So did you have favorite classical composers or compositions when you were in that phase of your training?
My favorite, of course, was Mozart. My favorite at the time was whatever my teacher told me it was. Back in the day, we did what we were told, and Miss McLean, she exposed us to show tunes and, many things like that. As a kid, the music that my parents, were shared with me
Mm-hmm.
was, Barbara Streisand, Judy Garland, show tunes.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a far reach,
Mm-hmm.
from what Miss McLean was talking about.
Right.
But she crafted my voice as an apparatus for classical voice.
Mm.
And so that was, my sister would tease me sometimes and tell me, "Oh no, don't sing that because everything you sing sounds like classical music." So it was very much a vessel for classical,
Yeah.
and so my favorite was to sing in Italian.
Mm-hmm.
German was a struggle, but that's what you had to do,
Right.
and but I just loved it. I lived and breathed it every day.
Wow. So then the obvious question is, how in the world did you move away from opera, this love of your life?
How indeed. So I was walking down a practice room hallway, and I heard a young man playing in one of the rooms, and I knocked on the door and I said, "What is that you're playing?" I thought it was experimental classical music, maybe Bizet. I mean, that was like what I was like, what could be, the most imaginative thing,
Right.
in the classical realm that
Right.
I could be listening to right now. And he said, "No, this is Thelonious Monk." I said,
Oh.
"Who's Thelonious Monk?" And he looked at me like I had three heads. The song was Round Midnight.
Oh, wow.
And as I think back to it, I think more than anything, we're talking about a 17, 18-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
So at best, he's probably butchering it. But the fact that that song really, gosh, it really just captured me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to know what it was, why it was, who was this Thelonious Monk. I had no point of reference. My parents were
Wow.
not jazz people. I didn't know who Ella was. I didn't know who Duke was. I didn't know anything
Wow.
about this music at all. So I went home that summer seeking out this music. And in Chicago, there's all these different spaces and places for music, of course,
Sure.
especially jazz.
Sure.
And so I went to one space, it was called the Cotton Club. I said, "No, that's not it. That was more like smooth jazz." No. I went to this place called the Velvet Lounge. That was more avant garde. No, that's not it. And a friend of mine told me about this little bar, really, on the south side of Chicago,
Uh,
where these gentlemen, Vaughn and George Freeman, happened to be performing every week. And I walked in the door and I said, "Oh, that's it. That's it." I found out it was straight ahead jazz,
yeah.
and that was it. I never looked back. I
Wow.
never looked back.
Wow. But you are also, as you just told me before we turned the microphones on here, you just told me that you've got this long-standing artist in residence role at a very classical institution. So you've actually sort of come full circle. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, once I got started in jazz, that was it. I toured all over the world. I
Hmm.
did several records, and one of my mentors, Elise Clairbout, who is the president of Billy Strayhorn Songs Publishing,
Wow.
and is Billy Strayhorn's niece.
Oh,
And so we met, and she wanted me to start performing a lot of her uncle's music. And she was in partnership with the Music Institute of Chicago, putting on a tribute to Billy Strayhorn. And that's when I met Mark George, the new executive director at the time for the Music Institute of Chicago here in Evanston. And so we got a chance to chat. And I performed. And he said, "I hear, did you ever take classical lessons?" He said to me. I said, "Oh, as a matter of fact, yes, I did. That was a large part of my life for my young adulthood." And oh, really? Okay. And so just chatting over, the dinner that we had after the show and getting to know more about him, that his background in jazz music and his interests. And that was it. It was just a conversation. A few weeks later, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have an idea I'd like to talk to you about." And he was starting a jazz program at the Music Institute. And in doing so, he wanted an ambassador of sorts. And I want someone that understands what we do as a classical institution, but also understands that there's a synergy between jazz and classical music, and which I already believed. And so when I said that to him, he was like, "Oh, I found my person," And so that's how we came together. The position was supposed to be for a year, and this year makes it 11 that I've been with the Music Institute. And every year I program their jazz festival. And we've had, through my relationships in the jazz world, we've had amazing musicians from all over the world, and some of the most amazing musicians in jazz: Dee Dee Bridgewater, Terrell Stafford, everyone that you could think of. And so we've done tributes to several great giants in jazz. And so it's something that's been a real blessing, really, in my life to have that connection.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting, too, because I am of the opinion, and I don't necessarily have complete clarity on it, but I'm really of the opinion that we, as in people who love music and talk about music and are in music, we've sort of overdone the whole notion of these genres. And, I feel as though, we've sort of separated, like jazz is so different and opera is so different and Baroque music is so different. Like I think we've sort of created these little islands. And I think that, in fact, there's more in common with the different genres, these arbitrary divisions that we've made or definitions that we made, than differences. And so, to your point, you are a classically trained opera singer who has this facility for jazz and this deep knowledge and an ability to go back and forth with it. The mechanics, the techniques, the singing, sort of the expected kinds of aesthetics are different, but that's no different from saying you might use a different instrument or you might use a different string or bow or head joint or whatever. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, about musical genres, and are they really that distinctly different, or is music mostly music?
That's a great question. I think it has a twofold answer, though. Music, in many facets, is music. But when it comes to performing and presenting the authentic presentation of those genres, each one has its own pedagogy, right? And so when you talk about, when you're hearing a classical singer sing jazz, it's out of point. It sounds different because her physiological training is to project and present classical music.
Right.
And so when she steps into another genre, you hear that she brings that with her, right? And it's the same thing for gospel. Gospel and jazz has just as much of a storied pedagogical approach as German Lieder. And so I think that's the thing that's sometimes left by the wayside when we talk about music of the Black diaspora, right? And as far as being able to synergize these genres, absolutely we can do that. With Robert Glasper and hip hop and jazz, with oh my goodness, his name just dropped out of my head, a trumpet player who just did this amazing opera, Fire in My Bones, right?
Terrence Blanchard.
Yes, Terrence Blanchard. Yes. Coming into the classical world.
Right.
Even, gosh, I remember as a child, and again, this is in high school, and I was laser focused on classical music. And a dear friend of mine introduced me to this record by a singer by the name of Gino Vanelli.
Oh.
This is back in the 80s. Gino Vanelli did this record called Pauper in Paradise,
Hmm.
where it was, I mean, I'll tell your listeners, if you haven't heard it, go find it. A Pauper in Paradise. And it is actually a suite of instrumental music as well as jazz. And when I tell you this really, now that I think back, changed my life.
Hmm.
It changed my life in the way that I think about music. It opened me up to the fact that yes, there is a synergy between the two. That's where I based my thinking on that, because he was able to really span the genres and bring them all together in a really exciting, entertaining, and moving way. And so, yes, I agree with you that the genres are meldable,
Mm-hmm.
but they are very distinct in their approaches. And so that should be respected.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you still sing any classical music?
I sing uh, in a realm that is formal presentation, which is Negro spirituals.
Oh.
And I really love that. I love that music. It's the music that I started singing classical music on.
Mm-hmm.
And also, one thing that one has to be very cognizant of is their ability and apparatus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my uh, ability to sing classical as I did as a young person, my muscles aren't there anymore.
Ah.
But there are some things that I can do,
Mhm.
and those that I can, I do. I have friends that allow me to come and hang out with them and sing that kind of music, but it's rare.
Nice, nice. And what's some of your favorite music to listen to?
Oh wow. My kids tease me. Um, I'm a very eclectic listener. Some of my favorite music to listen to is soft rock.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
Barbara Streisand, Led Zeppelin, you
Wow.
name it. I love music. I
Yeah.
love folk music. I I'm really my son is trying to get me to listen to what is that heavy metal, and he's like, Mom, listen to this. And I was like, okay, I can go there with you. I couldn't listen to a whole concert of it, but very, very broad. I mean, I think that you have to be open. You
Mhm.
have to be open to see everything good in all music because it's all someone's creative expression. Old school hip hop music from when I was, coming up. Hip hop has just turned 50 years old,
I know,
for
right?
better or for worse sometimes. But yes, I listen to all kinds of music.
Yeah. Well, there's a great expression that I really love that is the more you love music, the more music you love. And so
Mm,
that seems to be sort of what you're saying. And so what an eclectic list indeed. Soft rock, Led Zeppelin, folk, and heavy metal. That's great. That's great. I sometimes think, I run and I didn't used to listen to music. And last couple of years, I have started listening to music while I run. And I just play it aloud. I don't use an earbud or anything. And it's a very far flung kind of playlist. And I always think I would probably curl the hair of Sunday Baroque listeners if they could hear what's on my running playlist because it's all over the place. But so I am curious to know what are you most passionate about these days, whether it's musically or
mm.
otherwise? What are some of the things that are exciting you, maybe keeping you up at night, or what are you passionate about right now, Tammy?
Wow, I really love your questions. What am I most passionate about? I think right now I am most passionate about jazz music education
Mm-hmm.
and my own personal journey. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a closet bass player. And I have been taking lessons in upright bass
Wow.
on and off for several years. As you can see right now by my fingernails, I'm off. Uh, my bass teacher calls me and said, "Really? So I guess we're not practicing right now." And I'm like, "Okay, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. I'll cut him, I promise." And so it's my own personal growth as a musician. I am an empty nester, so I have a lot more time on my hands.
Mhm.
And so I want to grow as a musician in my own original music. Writing, I've been writing for over the years, but just having the confidence to put your original music out there.
Mhm.
And number two is music education, jazz music education. I'm very passionate about letting people understand, getting people to understand that jazz has a pedagogy, that there is an apprenticeship approach to jazz that stems from its origins, and that it's really important to bring together the academic approach as well as the apprenticeship approach. So what I like to call having the cats in the classrooms, right? People, actual practitioners of this music. And I think it's vital. I think that I graduated from the University of Von Freeman. And what I learned from having that bandstand approach is just, it's immeasurable, you know. And I think it's important for all of us to sit down at the table and think about what's the best way to scale these kids and make sure that they understand every facet that's expected of them if they go out into the performance world, as it is with classical, as it would be with any genre that you want to really be proficient in executing. One of my mentors was a marvelous gentleman. His name was Stanley Crouch. And Stanley used to say to me, "Tammy, are you going to be a singer or are you going to be a craftsman of this music?" And I took that so seriously, and it really shaped my approach to the music, my approach to education, and my expectation when I do rarely have private students, and my approach to engaging with them in this music. As a matter of fact, I had a wonderful opportunity to be the vocal instructor for Christian McBride's jazz camp, Jazz House Kids in Montclair, New Jersey. Marvelous experience. And we had kids from all over the world. And it gave me an opportunity to really hone in to what they're thinking about, you know, how they see this music from their generational perspective. And so that's why I say you have to always be growing. You have to always be learning. I feel like you've just never arrived. This music can always surprise you, and you can always grow in it.
Yeah, yeah. That's a perfect jumping off point for the next thing I wanted to ask you, which is what kind of career advice would you want to give your younger self? And also, what would you say to other aspiring musicians of any genre? I mean, someone aspiring to a musical career.
To my younger self, I would say stay in college. I came home and I got an opportunity to go as a backup singer for a tour. I think this was my junior year, and to be a backup singer on a tour. And I just never went back. Once I went to do that tour, the booking agency that booked him in Europe booked me. And so I went on for several years with my own jazz and gospel tours throughout Europe. And so I think that's the one thing I would say to my younger self. Learn an instrument. To my younger self at the time, I loved the bass, but my generation, they said, "Oh, girls don't play the bass. You know, you got to play piano, you got to do this." And, you know, that wasn't my spirit. My spirit instrument was the bass. It always had been. And so those are the two things that I would say to myself. To new musicians that think that they want to make this their life's work: diversify. Make sure that you have your degree. And you can have your degree in business, you can have in, in economics, you can have it in, you can do a music minor, right? Having a music performance major, if you're not going to go get a master's in education, it's just about the business of it all, right? Especially when after COVID, when essentially the music stopped all over the world.
Right.
And individuals that had a diversification track, musically. I know how to teach. I know how to do all these other things that you know how to do. You were able to sustain yourself. I mean, I have friends that both of them were musicians and they lived in New York City, one of the most expensive places to live. So, but they had a diversification track. Right. And so that's really, really important. It doesn't mean that you're selling out. It doesn't mean that you don't take your music seriously. It means that you're just thinking about the future and you have to have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed when it comes to making adult decisions about your future, and also take it seriously. Practice every day. Tomorrow is not promised. This business is just like the NBA. How many NBA players are there? Very few. And to be a journeyman musician, is something that it's really doable, but all of us are not going to be, Wynton Marsalis. All of us are not going to be Beyonce. And it's really important that you have that real conversation with yourself. I think I stopped singing twice. I was like, oh, I'm not going to sing anymore. I'm going to give up. I'm a hack. I don't have a chance to do this. And, that's because over the years, you have to have these real conversations with yourself because every year a new artist comes out. Every year, a graduating class of new passionate musicians comes out. And it takes real dedication and real understanding that, you got to be honest with yourself every day. Do I have what it takes? Do I have the tenacity, the grit, the hard work ethic to make it happen? Do I have the resources to pour into my craft, to take music lessons, to take voice lessons, to facilitate my career by, paying my own way to this place to sing at this club? Or, there's so much to it. There's a lot to it. It's not just all standing in front of that microphone and hearing the roar of the crowd, Right. There's a lot to this business. And I feel like that's missing. I feel like that's missing in the performance. There's a lot of performance majors that don't really know what to expect once they walk across that graduation stage.
Yeah. What great advice and what real wisdom, Yeah. Well, I have been having an absolutely delightful conversation on Zoom with the multi-talented and internationally acclaimed singer, Tammy McCann. I cannot thank you enough for making time to have this conversation.
I cannot thank you enough for thinking of me. The new music that I'm doing is, I think, the most personal that I've ever done in my life. I feel like I found my voice for the first time. And for people like you to shine a light on the work that I do, it's just very heartening. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's just absolutely been a pleasure. And I look forward to hearing some of these new wonderful personal songs.
Thank you, Suzanne. It is Do I Move You? And it's on all platforms. And I'm super excited about it.
Me too. And yes, you move me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life, and I'm feeling